Everybody. Not exactly how I planned to start the stream, but here we are. Um, Given the hour, it may be a challenge to do a full length stream. I'm going to do my best to go as far as I can with it. But yeah, the fact of the matter is, I left work around the time that I would start streaming, and then on top of having to get groceries, and then all the other associated adventures. I think probably I actually got on the bus around, what is it? Probably closer to 8 o'clock. So that was already an hour past. So not a promising start, but I did mean it when I said that I wanted to try and keep the broadcasts going on the normal schedule until Family Day. So we'll do our best, and if it's a shorter stream, I do apologize, but I also want to make sure that I'm getting enough sleep for work, because of course that cough you heard indicates that I'm not 100% back. And if you can just give me a second, there's a computer to the side of me that I need to run an update on. I forgot. So it's just going to take one more moment, and I should be good. I should have done that before I started, but obviously when I'm feeling a bit behind, I do rush to get the stream started, and inevitably I have to give some of that back in terms of the updates that I didn't get done. The tweet's out, but all right. So yeah, a couple of unexpected surprises there. I'm glad I did that. So we, judging by my notes, we actually had quite a bit that we wanted to get through. So I'll maybe do a tiny little bit of housekeeping at the start. So I've been noticing, there's two things that I've kind of noticed. There's been some friends, people online who have been doing sort of subathons, and they've been doing very, very well. And obviously there's, the old proverb, comparison is the thief of joy and such, and it's not always good to do these to try and establish sort of a baseline in terms of your peers or whatever, if I can even call them my peers. They're doing much better than me. But I do think it's helpful to get a read on the stream. The fact of the matter is that it is pretty uncommon for people to say exactly what's going wrong with the broadcast. More often they'll just leave. And then of course the people who will be quite open about what's going wrong with the broadcast are not always going to present it in a way that is kind or thoughtful. It's not very informative to me when somebody comes in and is like, just stop playing, play the game. Because the best days of the stream have had, the very talkative style, and the worst days of the stream have had the very talkative style. And most importantly, when those, when those really good days have been because, I have an early access to, to a game that might be anticipated. The fact of the matter is those people are not going to be back once the game is released. And so there can be a danger in terms of, one, rewarding that kind of person, right? Like, you want to be receptive to feedback, which I do with varying degrees of success, if I'm completely honest with myself. But the fact of the matter is that I actually don't think it's a good thing, and I try as much as I can to be somewhat empathetic with the commenter, as well as being really clear in terms of what I think an acceptable sort of exchange is. I think there's a certain amount, particularly at the smaller end, in terms of popularity or whatever, I do sometimes feel that there is a great challenge in terms of people treating either, live broadcasts, I guess, have a little bit more of justification, but even things like YouTube, like essentially any form of entertainment that they click on has to be this sort of bespoke product that is dedicated for them, no deviation allowed. And obviously you are sort of fighting, multi-billion-dollar companies you're fighting against them to create that perception, because obviously, the Googles and the Twitches and the Amazons of the world really do want you to sort of feel like everything is custom tailored for you. That is exactly why those platforms are so successful. But from a practical point of view, as a content creator, one of the drawbacks is that it can be, this major point of offense to not be exactly what the person was looking for, based on their clicking on a link. And I think, I get a little grouchy with some of usually it's a news article or something like that, but like we're all familiar with the sort of, very provocative headline that becomes a point of major, like, just disappointment, right? It's just this very vapid, completely uninteresting take that did not require the mystery of the headline. But of course, the click is what matters, and that's exactly what they got out of you. So I can kind of understand that some people express disappointment that way, but I think there's a very big difference between somebody putting out a product, putting out a video that doesn't necessarily pretend to be anything other than it is, and then having somebody sort of put that video on blast because it didn't meet standards that that person was bringing in on its own. And of course, there's always room for maneuver in there. But in general, I think it's something that should be fought against, while also trying to accept the signal that you're getting in terms of what works and what doesn't. Which of course brings me to the fact that there are any number of reasons why a concurrent view count may be higher or lower. But the fact of the matter is that I have been and would like to be a variety stream. It is how I found Cultist Simulator in the first place. And between Book of Hours and House of Light, it's been probably well over a year since I've actually played something different. Now, I'd really like to see this thing through to the end, which is why I'll continue to play this. But I have kind of been reflecting on the fact that this is not exactly the peak of the stream, and I've been trying to think a little bit about some ways in which I can do things that people will want to watch. Again, not falling into that sort of slavish attention to people who don't necessarily have the broadcast's best interests in mind, while also still accepting the signal that this is not necessarily something that I could sustain an entire broadcast on. Now, none of that, of course, is going to be changing today. I do still intend to finish House of Light, and I don't intend to rush it. But I am going to try and do, number one, a number of different types of games. I would like to try and get back to a little bit more strategy, although I'm going to need to build up to that, I think. And then there's a few sort of, I'll call them fan service games. I think they're games that people really like, and I think they're ones that fit well for the stream, and they're just ones that have sort of been crowded out a little bit by what's going on. Now, there was a reason why I brought this up in the first place. I'm trying to remember exactly where I was going with it. I didn't. Part of it I did want to talk a bit about where the long-term plans were going. Obviously, one thing that would help as well is to be a bit more consistent on the start times. Unfortunately, that's not something I always have control over. But you know what? There was a little bit more I was going to talk about, but I'm appreciating the fact that we're about 10 minutes in and I haven't really been talking about the game yet. So I'll leave it there and maybe try and fold in some of the other things that I can over time. But basically for today, I'm going to try and get through the lessons as quickly as I can. Now, we have the Wound Wounds. I don't believe we have worked out what we want to do with Disciplines of the Scar yet. But I have worked out the next 3 salons. So once we finish the Wound Wounds, I don't really have that much to do in terms of reading texts. I'm not going to completely ignore the text because I would like to read more about Noon, and I would like to read more about I'd like to read more about the about Ys. But those are things that I can sort of do in a... I can do that in oh, sorry, it's the Wound Wounds, but we also have the 3 films as well, so we're not quite done with the leveling. Hello, Jamie. How you doing? So those are sort of the immediate term is the leveling. Medium term, I'd say complete all of the books. And then from there, the real aim is going to be to gain as much specific information from the various texts. That might also be a nice excuse for me to do a little bit more reshelving. That's probably a more substantial project than I appreciate, but I think it's something I'd like to put some attention to. And then, of course, the longer term would be to finally fill out the rest of the Lighthouse Institute, but I don't quite feel the same need to rush on those. And looks like... So what's the deal here? Ah, yes. I'm trying to remember if this memory, writing on the wall... I'm trying to remember if we had committed something to the journal. So we've got, we came from nowhere, Black the First Flower, Speech the Key, and the Horndak's oldest. So why was it that I... Oh, that's right. I wanted the edge so that I could read the Wound Wounds. All right. The writing on the wall, the most delicious traditions of the Carapace Cross, as recorded on the walls of the Mansus and transcribed into a book of 99 pages by one known only as CC. Although this book does not exist, it is read to a sleeper under certain very specific circumstances and certain fragments jotted down on waking. It was hunger that made worms of dragons when they consumed the corpses of ours. Without the savor secret of the Carapace, their hunger would not have been sufficient. Here is outlined the savor secret of the Carapace, which harnesses hunger to permit impossible hybridizations. With this secret, even the most potent and fundamental entities have devoured and been devoured, and this, no doubt, is why it's secret. Alright, memories fade, assistance departs, but the soul is refreshed. So I think before I go too far, let's do a couple of things. So one, I'm going to bring Mr. Kill in. I think we're going to need a bunch of memories, so it wouldn't hurt to have someone to chat with. Mr. Kill always enjoys a chance to catch up with me. If you don't choose a topic, Mr. Kill will offer help as a friend. Now the next question will be, what does it take to read the Wound Wounds? And you know what? Because it's the last text, let's do this at Caller's desk. So I think Edict's Martial is my best edge. I know we've got Disciplines of the Scar, but that's at level 9, not level 10. So if we take the Edict's Martial, and with that we've got the Irresistible Feast. Now I could put the Perinculate in the With option. I'm not going to do that quite yet. I will get the remaining elements of the soul in place. And then we'll put the Cucurbit Barrette. Okay, so that's 15 of 18. That's an interesting problem. So we've got 3. Oh yeah, so the Arab here will do the trick. And do we not have... I would have thought we'd have a higher... Ah. We're using the Carmine Petal. Okay, so I'm probably overdoing it with the Wound Wounds, but you know what? Let's just go all in on the on reading the remaining texts. Alright, I can master this mystery. Enough edge to match mystery edge. So, we're bringing in Mr. Kill for a source of memories. And then we've got all of the leveling that we wanted to do with our to-do list from the last stream. Sorry, just need a minute to queue something up. DOH, oh dear. Probably DOD, maybe? No, that couldn't be it. Disciplines of the Hammer, of course. Okay, so that's Edge and Forge. And that's 6 of them, so... I'm not going to get too clever with this. I'm just going to go for anything that has Edge and Forge in it for now. None of those do the trick. But the patterns will. I haven't the foggiest idea which of these I've read yet, so we'll do Songs of the Carapace Cross. Excuse me. So even though Mr. Kill will be helping me with memories, I'm just going all in on the on advancing Disciplines of the Hammer. So the plan here is that I'm going to have one primary skill that I'm trying to level up, and then if, you know, a character like Mr. Kill winds up generating some other memories that are helpful for the next one, that's great. But I've got enough elements of the soul right now that I don't need to be as timid as before. We're really not saving as much if I hold back. All right. Well, you know what? It's been a while since we've done the Incandescent Tantra, so let's do that. Maybe I could do a heart instead. So that was Foresight. Again, it's Edge and Forge that I'm looking for. So Regrets should give me some kind of Forge. Now we already started the Ivory book, so on to maybe Codex Assassin. I could never remember where we're going. You know, let's start from Barrowchild's Elegies and move up. Alright. So we've already got the Foresight. Fear gives us Edge, so that will work as well. I'm running out of space. All right, and then I don't think we're going to be able to fill up all of them. So Exorcist's Field Manual, that'll get me my contradictions. But the Gossip doesn't really help me. So the last thing that I can do here is I can basically get some furniture. So we'll touch maybe the Wine Dark chair. What do I have the most of? Faust. Investigate the object. You won't use this up or consume it by doing this. So there's a couple of other things that I can do. So what I think I will do, I first want to occupy the various desks. Do I have VAC in use right now? I do not. So what I'll do here is I'll actually listen to A Tower Rises. So that'll get me a Confounding Parable. That one we can use a FET for. In fact, if I had used the... I could have gotten a Fear from recordings from the Altheban Abyss. But let's do a cheerful ditty because we will have Magaphine Mysteries before too long. And that's not one that Mr. Kill can help with. So we'll do opening the sky. And then I don't think the existing film will help. I think that's a Revelations, yeah. So the other option that I have here would be to take Collar's desk. So you can put a medal there. And for that one, we're already getting Confounding Parable, so probably the Bittersweet Certainty makes sense here. Book of True Blood. I think Book of True Blood might actually... I'm trying to remember if all of these give us Bittersweet Certainty or not. Anyways, we know Glimmerings does, so I'm going to read that. Zerog, good to see you. I do appreciate all of you who are stopping by at this rather uncommon hour for the stream. Alright, an offer from Oriflammes. Oriflammes, established 1776, Scent Sign Sciences. Dear librarian, we'd like to offer you this opportunity to purchase the hunting journals of Brian DeWolf. Brian DeWolf, son of the 3rd Baron Bran Krug, gives advice on hunting in the bounds. So, just toss this tin Spintria there. Mr. Kill can always spare a few hours to help a friend. So again, no major expectations from Mr. Kill here. This is really just more about getting the memories that I can. Now, for some reason, I felt that I needed to keep the satisfaction. I'm not really going to try and guess my intentions behind a whole lot of this stuff. It's, I'm really playing a lot of this by ear. So, the Wine Dark Chair, an elegant 18th century piece imported from France. There were 12 of these, but Gervinus van Loren had most of them broken up and burnt the week after his arrival. Bad memories is all he would say. Okay, so this first memory here is going to be for Transformations and Liberations. Now, in anticipation of Magaphine Mysteries, which has a heart element, we can get some sound with the Hush House key. So where I can, I want to kind of keep generating free memories, although one of the challenges is that in about 30 seconds we're going to start leveling things up. Alright, so that foresight goes to waste, but we kind of signed up for that possibility. We also have lots of water, so I think I'm going to start bringing up the Faust right away. Although I will confess, I don't think I've ever really sat back in bed with a cup of water. You really need to lie back in bed with a poutine. The Carmine Petal Unexpurgated, a project proposed by Lionel of the Society of the Noble Endeavor, by which he claims he succeeded in creating a sanctuary for a fugitive forge name, the Unexpurgated version. At the time this book was written, a fugitive forge name would have been guilty of heresy, treason, or both. Lionel suggests that the House of Iron and Fire so created would include hollows of air and night, which would serve as a final hiding place if the larger sanctuary were uncovered, though he says they could easily be revealed with invocations of disciplines of either Scar or of Hammer. 3 disciplines of the Hammer. That's going to be fun to work with. We'll see the... oh god, we're getting so much foresight. Yeah, we'll see where all of that goes. I sort of feel like if I'm going to put... We should probably have the Carmine Petal beside each other. So, do a little reorganization. I do believe I worked some of this stuff out before, but I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on this. We've got the whole season ahead of us. The Wound Wounds was probably premature. But I think if we really focus, we should be able to see this stuff see this stuff through. Alright. The Songs of the Carapace Cross. Micah Z, sometimes called the Magus of Quartz, etched this work in acid on stone. It has been reproduced many times in many languages since, but the reproductions are often lost to landslides. Z describes the rites of the gods who were stone, the first hours as practiced before the existence of human civilization by the Carapace Cross. He claims a final survivor of the cross shared the information with him. The rites are largely obsolete now. Few have been observed, in the last 1,000 years at least, to have any effect at all. Nevertheless, Z identifies at least one invocation of particular power. He warns that it should be used with caution, lest the gods who were stone might find their way back from nowhere. The Incandescent Tantra. Michael Blockley, the eccentric iron magnate, was fond of quoting from this tantra. Blockley died in a factory fire. Dialogues with an entity called the Crucible Prince. The prince warns about the appetites of his mistress, the Burning Queen, and the peril of the naked desires she shares with the sun, but professes his loyalty nevertheless. A rite which changes is necessarily a rite which destroys, but a great change requires a destruction of savage extent. Our beloved foresight. Don't know where we'd be without it. Opening the Sky, an unusual recording of Varro's Opening the Sky, composed for the coronation of the new king, Henry IX. The record bears the expression stamp expunge. The first movement is soft, autumnal. The second unsettling, febrile. The third is bright, soaring, rapturous. The fourth movement is glassy, slithering, a tintinnabulous icicle rattle. The fifth returns to the theme of the third, bright and rapturous once again, but it is a choral movement. It becomes apparent, though, that these are much, much too pure and high to be human voices. They recall birdsong, they recall the sweep of the windswept sky, blue turning black at the edge of the higher heaven, and they wrench the heart in a direction the Bureau does not permit. The Deeds of the Scarred Captain, painstakingly assembled by the soldier of fortune and sometimes remittance man Pavel Shulga during his years in Greece. An account of the founding of Mycenae by a scarred captain who first slew 7 monsters to make the land safe. As the captain destroys each monster, a flood of blood rises higher, until at last a priestess drowns and is reborn as a serpent goddess. She blesses the captain, and he departs for the house above the forest, leaving Mycenae to reign supreme after the flood of blood subsides. So all of these are relevant to moving up. It's funny that I wanted to move up Disciplines of the Hammer, but... well, not entirely. I think I understand why. The Barrowchild's Elegies. The Barrowchild, a Gaulish adept who won a place in the ranks of the Ordo Lamea, enumerates the great shadows laid to rest in tombs of power and discusses their various conditions. The Barrowchild identifies numerous modes that are neither true death nor true life: the vitrification of the heart, the corrupt light of the wood, chorostasis, the wandering of the fet. The Barrowchild warns particularly of the avidity of tryst, where a remnant shadow's longing for change survives its sense of self and even devours its wist. That longing may draw the curious into the tomb, where the remnant shadow changes so that it cannot be distinguished from its visitor, or that the reverse becomes true, that it is never again possible to say whether it is the shadow or the visitor that exits the tomb. An Exorcist's Field Manual, a practical guide to troublesome dead, grounded in theory, but with a clear focus on their disposal by the redoubtable Detective Austieri Wheelock of the Suppression Bureau. The dead usually avoid light, as the most immediate manifestation of eternity, which has no place for death. However, those dead uplifted by gold, that is to say touched by an actinic theoplasma, happily bought about in daylight and are perhaps strongest at noon. If you are dead but uplifted by green, that's the Ringyu's blessing. The crown growth offers a similar but nastier benefit. This is how burgeoning risen come about, but there are different degrees of sentience and freedom depending on which growths are involved. The consciousness of one uplifted by green is always greatly altered, though. They never really seem like the same person. They may have dregs of their original souls, but these are often replaced by something else. The upshot, invariably, is that they need to be set firmly on fire. Glimmerings, an anonymous prison diary written by a dreamer convicted of oniric irresponsibility and confined to the cucurbit. The prisoner is plainly terrified and bewildered by their situation and has been unable to wrangle a coherent explanation out of anyone, but the dreams keep coming and they keep writing them down. Snow, broken mirrors, half-heard sky music, flowers of white, red, and black, a blood-streaked winter dawn, the most notorious signifiers of oniric risk, fantastically vivid and detailed. No wonder they were locked up. Their final recorded dream is of a worm jewel beneath Brandkrug Isle, which they open with a key carved from their fingerbone. So that should go to the other pile here. Tower Rises. The phonograph is packaged in glossy card, the bright pink of a dog rose, with the words "A Tower Rises" in 9 languages on both sides. There is no other identifying information at all. Hisley the Fox, how are you doing? Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate, like I said before, I do appreciate all of you hanging out. I was kind of doubtful, given the fact that I was so close to the wrapping up time when I was starting. I was kind of debating on streaming, and in the end I decided to go for it because, you know, this is what you do, right? You know, if you announce that you're going to stream, I may not be able to control when I start. Well, I mean, beyond career-limiting moves. But I wanted to just take the time to acknowledge that, simply because it's one of these nice things where you never know when you're about to start a stream whether or not, you know, that effort is rewarded or appreciated. And being here is one of those things that does really help that. So again, I don't want to. It's very tedious, and I think I talk too much about sort of the health of the stream or the numbers or whatever too much. But it is an indirect way in which I can express that kind of gratitude. So thank you, all of you. A recording of uncertain origin, inexplicably compelling poetry recorded by a speaker with a high, sweet voice that scales up beyond human hearing in a language called Vak, which probably isn't spoken by more than a few dozen living scholars. The poem speaks of the wheel that turns, the coil that turns, the tide that returns, egg that returns. It speaks of a cloven sky, an opened heart, a dream of glittering eyes. Speaks lastly of its own conclusion, when it might be spoken in dreams before the deep door by a messenger of histories. All right, so this is a chance for us to take stock. So the target of our reading, first of all, okay, we've got 0.7 seconds. I think I can... 0.7 seconds isn't that much to gain by reading the text, so I'm just going to cross that over. The Hush House key, heavy enough that it takes both hands to turn. Heavy enough to brain someone, though you'd need both hands for that too. Serena Blackwood herself forged this key. I am tired of losing it, she said. Okay. So, like I said before, the real aim right now is to have one primary goal in terms of the books that we're reading. So in this case, this would be leveling up Disciplines of the Hammer. Now, the ones that I want to prioritize towards Disciplines of the Hammer will be the ones that Mr. Kill might potentially be using. So that would be these 3 here. As it is, I think we only have enough for... Yeah. We only have enough for... or sorry, we have just enough in terms of the memories. Which is fine. I'm not at all worried about that. But what we'll do here is we'll apply the Arab. So when I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. And the ideal for this this kind of leveling system is that we now get to take stock in terms of what we need for Magaphine Mysteries. So this is a Heart and Moon. This is a Heart and Moon skill to level up. And of course, we've already put some effort towards that. So we've got the Satisfaction, we've got the Cheerful Ditty. So Bittersweet Certainty doesn't get anything for us. However, the Clouds are available, as is the Confounding Parable, as is the Sound. So what we can do here is we can now apply. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, actually, we only need the 5 here. So we're perfectly ready to go with Magaphine Mysteries. So we'll just say, okay, that's already in the queue. So Herbs and Infusions, similar story. This one's a little complicated simply because it also has a heart element, and in fact there's not that much in terms of nectar that we can do. But let's... actually, the best thing that I can do... because I know in 30 seconds we're going to be using the Cheerful Ditty, and the Sound for that matter, although the Sound I'm not going to be able to get back. Let's just go back to the phonograph. So I don't think it hurts to use the Fed again. So this time we'll read the Invisible Opera, or listen to the Invisible Opera. Okay, so Herbs and Infusions doesn't quite justify a confounding parable, though. I may need a think on that. In fact, none of these, other than the Cheerful Ditty, really help. So that's one of the Heart and Nectar. We have read the Green Jade Tablet before, so maybe we'll move on to one of the other impulses. So that's 1 of 5, so one of these will be 2 of 5. Let's do Udrakas, or Rokashas. So that should be 2. So it's Nectar and Heart, just as a reminder to myself. So that's 3 with the Storm. What am I doing? 4 with the Satisfaction. I think the Solace is the answer to this last one. Okay, so that should be Herbs and Infusions accounted for. So that now brings us to Sharps. Sharps was going to go to Desires and Dissolutions, another surprising one, but that's going to be for Moon and Grail. So that actually justifies the confounding parable. Excuse me. We'll also go for Moon, so on to Deaths of the Moon, I think? No, we're doing the Wound Wounds, so we'd have to do the Sea Does Not Regret. Hisley says, Book of Hours late game seems terrifyingly complicated. Good thing I restarted your run a couple days ago. You won't have to worry about it for a while. It's probably not as bad as it looks. The one thing that I will say that I'm getting a little bit used to for House of Light is that the number of salons that I host, especially with sort of 5 guests in the middle of the day, has resulted, and I'm noticing this in the subreddit too, there's a lot of people posting these screenshots of sort of trees of wisdoms with everything, including the languages up to 9. And it makes sense because, you know, I'm not actually taking advantage of the fact that you can break up a skill during Numa now. Everything's already committed to the Tree of Wisdoms. But if you want, it's actually really easy now to sort of just supercharge your skill tree, even without reading that many books. So one of the things that becomes a bit of a challenge here is just having to sort of navigate what memories I want to generate, because it's quite easy to wind up in a situation where I have multiple skills that are sort of demanding something like 7 memories. And normally that's a time when you're thinking, okay, so what special, what special memory like a Hive's Lament am I going to be making to put towards that effort? But realistically, that's not actually something that I'm pursuing right now. I'm more just sort of focused on sort of the meat and potatoes of, this is the lowest level skill that I have. I'm going to use this extra skill to uplift it. The one thing that I will say, and it's a feature I quite like about this game, but I don't think it gets talked about a lot. It's just one of these things that's a convenient... actually, here's the better analogy for me to make. There are some games which really require balance almost to a point of symmetry. So chess is a pretty good example of this, except of course that there's the turn sequence, and so white has an advantage between 2 perfectly matched players. Now the challenge with that, a good example of this might be Civilization. So Civilization is something that can be played multiplayer, and people do get rather competitive about the game. And, this is evidenced by the very large number of difficulty levels and such. And you can see Civilization sort of traveling in that direction. But Civilization also has a lot of different, civilizations. There's a lot of different things that the player can start with. And so there is this great variety among the traits that you have, but there is an effort to balance them, because unlike history, it's not, I think the perception is that that game is not as fun if there is an inherent advantage to one civilization over another. So even though it would be completely justified for Egypt to sort of decline and not do as well in the later game, you do kind of need to put it on the same footing as, say, the United States in a game of Civilization. And, they partly make up for that by making the various civilizations sort of stronger in certain eras. But the idea on that one is that you do sort of violate the fantasy, right? The Civilization story with something that's a little bit more game oriented to make sure that it's still fun for the players. But the thing is that, and this is one that's difficult for me as somebody who's a bit more numbers oriented and who tends to, I find the economic model to be a very helpful one for studying a lot of different problems. So in many ways, if you can find an analogy to a market, you actually have a lot of very useful research that you can sort of tap into, regarding the properties of markets and certain conclusions that you can rely on under a certain set of assumptions. Obviously, not every situation satisfies those assumptions, which is why also those analogies can have a big problem. But I think the thing that I am most conscious about here is that there's also a set of games which do actually place a higher value on, and sorry, there is a point to all of this. I think it's helpful to expand on the point a little bit. There are some games that actually do place more emphasis on the variety, and maybe even abandon the idea of a balance completely. So maybe moving a little bit further on along the scale would be Amplitude's Endless games. So I'm thinking of Endless Space, Endless Legend. And for these ones, they feel like they really want very distinct, unique factions. I think those games are still largely built with the assumption that there should be, they should all be roughly even, but a little bit like a MOBA, right? They're even in a way that advantages that a particular character has at a certain stage of the game are countered by the fact that something else might be even more powerful in a later stage of the game. So there's still that effort there to make sure that you don't have sort of one dominant choice in competitive play. But then you can also look at games like The Darkest Dungeon. And of course, The Darkest Dungeon, until relatively recent DLC, was not at all concerned about PvP. There's just no reason to do it. And the nice thing about having a computer opponent is that it's never going to cry foul when the game is unbalanced. And in fact, that game goes even further, because this is also something that is true for the various classes. So where it might make sense if you're making a Street Fighter game, you would have a bunch of different, you'd have these fighters that are, again, roughly equal with each other. There's nobody to disappoint other than the player. So in this case here, the experience against the AI, obviously the enemy characters are given completely different abilities in something like Darkest Dungeon. But in some cases, like, if you think of Darkest Dungeon, unless you play on Stygian mode, there's absolutely no way for the player to lose. It is more likely that a player will give up, in frustration if they just constantly keep dying than it is for there to be a game over, right? There's just no situation in which the game permanently finishes. Although I know lots of people who are like, yeah, I lost my elite crew. There is no way I'm doing all that again. But the thing that I think is interesting about Darkest Dungeon is that it doesn't even balance out the individual characters. There are clearly some characters that are more strong than others. I'd argue in some cases, even in absolute senses, although even the characters that are weak in combat at least have sort of a bonus in terms of the Vestal can heal. Is the archaeologist? Anyways, there's a very weak combat unit that also helps you like just bring in pots of money. So there's a bit of a trade-off that you give there. But in the end, right, it's up to the player to decide whether or not they want to focus a lot on the stats. And again, it's, I think, in my opinion, a good choice for that game, that they're not actually trying to just smooth everything out, because they don't need to. They've made the unequal units. They've made them in such a way that the player can't necessarily ruin the experience for themselves. And I think there's some value in taking a lesson from that, particularly in a single-player game like Book of Hours, because I've talked about it before. There are some recipes, and this is kind of where the point is going with this. There are some recipes that are simply easier to make. So it is entirely possible to host a salon with only milk, because milk is both sustenance and... it's sustenance and... wait a minute. Yeah, restorative and sustenance. And it actually has a fairly reasonable number of... beverage as well. Although I'm trying to remember... Doesn't it... I need to think about how it interacts with the courses, though. Anyways, I'm like 99% sure that you can do a pure milk salon. Something like almonds, right? Almonds should be like the optimal side dish as long as you have at least one guest who's Forge, Grail, and Moth, because it requires absolutely nothing. You just need to buy them. But, and so far as I can tell, there's no advantage to having a higher level aspect. So making a knot cake is just a great way to miss out on, cuckoo honey, which is not easy to get, by the way. But the thing is that in this game, it's actually quite fun to make all of these things. It's the sort of case where you do actually want to put that effort in, because it's just interesting. You get to learn a little bit more about the setting. You get to, imagine building up something for yourself. It's kind of like The Sims, right? There might be an optimal way to play The Sims, but part of the Dollhouse fun is that you just get to do something on your own. And that, I think... again, the aim here was to talk a little bit more about the various skills and such, but I think probably one of the things that's nice about this is that even if you're not taking the time to sort of optimize your entire path through the game, you have had enough of a journey through the house. Once you kind of get to this point of the game here, you've learned enough tricks, you've learned enough things that work for you that you don't need to freak out too much in terms of the way that the memories are going. Obviously, I'm kind of going overboard on some of this, but it's really more just because I don't know, for lack of a better term, I can. It's just a nice little efficient way for me to keep things in my head. I don't know if that was helpful to go over, but it's just one of these things where I don't want to give the impression that the game is a bit more stern or difficult than it actually is. Most of the stuff that I run into is largely a function of me just wanting to do something a little fun or something a little silly, or just doing something in kind of an idiosyncratic way. Speaking of, I do need some Grail, so let's do... oh, we'll do Pursuit. I think I've done this recently. And I do have a spare spot with Collar's Desk. I'm just trying to remember if I did a contradiction book. It doesn't look like it, but I feel like... I should have, but I don't see it here, so I'm gonna run with it. What did I do? All right. Let's see how this turns out. Excuse me. Okay, hindsight. For some reason I thought Magaphine Mysteries had a winter side to it, but again, right now we're just sort of piling all of these on. I haven't actually tried this style of leveling, but I can see some advantages. The only thing is a more elaborate plan. Like if I work this all out from the start, I'd probably also be able to sort of work out, like I do in Numa, what memories I'm going to need at certain times. So there is a little bit of a cost to doing it this way, but I'm also conscious of the fact that I don't want to spend too much time on details like this so that I can move on to getting some more guests. At last, I'm something of an authority in this. Improve the skill to level 6. So we just have 4 more of the original batch, and then I start worrying about Disciplines of the Hammer. Alright, so that's going to be a Solace that gets overwritten, but again, this is the price we pay sometimes. Dead men don't tell no bloody tales. Well, who'd listen? Mr. Kill, Riot Spry, doesn't mind stopping for a gossip. By the way, we're coming up to the 1 hour mark. I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to do this, but I think I might take a small tea break. Nothing caffeinated, but I could use something to drink, and it's bitterly cold out, by the way, so it's almost -20 today. So while I do have the heat on, it might be nice to have a something to make me go to sleep. All right, The Wound Wounds, a history of 100 wars sewn into a design of metallic threads that pursues itself across every page. Darius and Alexander at Issus, the incandescent strivings of the houses of Lancaster and York, the Second Worm War. The final page of the book depicts the first battles of a war among ours, but the threads fray into alternatives, unbraiding from history. One of those threads is a coarse iron wire that whose twists suggest the disciplines of the Scar invoked before a subterranean configuration of iron, fire, and night. For this, 3 disciplines of the Scar. I didn't intend it this way, but it is actually kind of fun that in some of our last books we've got stab versus thump. Okay, a regret. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to put that actually. Okay, Ood Rokashas, an anonymous confessional account of unsanctioned activities by the nuns of St. Brendan's. The title is a Hennebeck phrase that might be translated as, "The spirit flees the shadowed places." The author writes guiltily of her dealings with hill children and carapace relics. She suggests she herself has a connection with one of the carapace kinds. Most of these dealings are trivial, but she claims to have arranged the death of the Marcher Lord William de Braose, called Black William. De Brause's wife Ava evidently seeks the abbey's help to free her from her hated husband. Subsequently, he is found in the bedchamber of the wife of Llewellyn the Great, Prince of the Welsh, while attempting to negotiate the marriage of his daughter, also Ava, to Llewellyn's son. Llewellyn takes this badly, de Braose is hanged, the elder Ava inherits his estates and makes a substantial endowment to St. Brendan's. In the author's telling, de Braose was innocent of all but cruelty, and the adulterer found in the bedchamber was a shape-changing undergoer. Okay, so that's the impulse for herbs and infusions. We will collect the Magathene Mysteries. The Flayed Tantra. This Tantra is recorded as being spoken by an enigmatic individual identified as Peel, with many of the qualities of the mythological Naga. The Flayed Tantra played a notable part in Alexander Sparrow's paranoid pamphleteering. Peel was numbered among the Great Hooded Princes, but it breaks with its brethren and followed the Thunderskin in the Endless Dance. Once Peel had peeled itself, it had the ink it needed to write the Tantra. It had to face the wrath of its fellows. Here is the invocation it used to fend them off. The joys of winter, ice on every surface, snow-carrying winds blowing in all directions at once, and the burning cold. Indeed. One of my friends here did point out, she's from Saskatchewan, but did point out that apparently in Saskatchewan it was something like minus 38. I think with wind chill, it felt like minus 48 or something like that. Like, that's Yakutsk kind of cold. But I don't know. I feel any negative double digits in in an environment is a point where you're allowed to complain. There is one thing I will say. It has been a while since I've seen this. My feeling of where I live is that for the most part, it's kind of this... It's actually quite nice around Christmas. And that can be nice because there are photograph opportunities there. You know, there's just a few things that really make it work. But the sneaky part is that, you know, you'll have a white Christmas. It's, you know, it's obviously below zero, but it's not, you know, it's not uncomfortable in most cases. But then what gets you is that there is this death march from like New Year's to like late March, sometimes mid-April, where it's just kind of gray and it gets a lot colder. That's when we start getting those, you know, deep double-digit negative numbers. And there isn't necessarily a lot of snow. It's just kind of whatever snow was there packs into ice and it just sort of sits there. And it feels like that forever. In fact, I shared this with a viewer There's a wonderful essay by George Orwell called Some Thoughts on the Common Toad. I still think it's a really timely essay for today. It's the concerns that... So there are some concerns that Orwell talks about that are, maybe not evergreen, but they would definitely persist over the decades. So, Christmas and, wondering whether or not the winter's ever going to end, that sort of stuff. But the specific concerns about, a bunch of socialists running around saying you're not allowed to enjoy things because, the plight of the common man should be moving you. That specific worry isn't something that a lot of us need to deal with day to day. It obviously depends a lot on your social circle, but it's maybe not the sort of thing you'll actively see inside of the papers in the same way. I mean, maybe if you read like The Nation or something like that, but it's maybe not the sort of thing that you'd see quite in the way that Orwell did. But it's obviously something that comes up a lot today in terms of, just sometimes these Olympics in terms of how hard people have it. And that essay, I think, is the antidote to it. I think actually the description of the frogs is a lot more interesting. But he wrote that because very often he would write these nature-loving essays, something that was true throughout his life. He didn't just start talking about it when he was writing for the Tribune. But he did have sort of audiences sort of talking about how he shouldn't be writing about this sort of stuff because, who cares about the joys of nature when, we're being oppressed? And I think his very reasonable answer to that was, what kind of future are we fighting for if we can't enjoy, the pleasures of nature, something that is freely available to anyone, even inside of a city. So it's one I'm sure I will be reading that in the, with the spring around the corner, but it's a little early for me to be reading that. I'm getting to the start where I'm miserable in the winter, but I'm not at the point where I feel that it's going to last forever. A Tower Falls. The phonograph is packed in glossy amethyst purple card with the words "A Tower Falls" in 9 languages on both sides. There is no other identifying information at all. That's what I do. I run around and tell everybody they can't be jolly. I personally feel that every community benefits from having a heel. I think in the game development community locally, I think my role as a heel is to tell everyone that AI is not as terrible as they say it is. I'm not trying to defend, and I think a lot of applications of AI are very uninteresting, and I can appreciate why people are uncomfortable with it, but I feel that case has been made quite frequently and repeatedly to a point that among a certain group of people, it's not even questioned. And I think the important place to be in terms of generating ideas is to question some of the premises. I very frequently run into situations where the idea of any generative imagery is automatically considered bad. And this can sound a little bit like a straw man, but the big difficulty I have with that stance is that while it is true, like on balance of probabilities, a lot of the things that are being condemned probably are the result of models that have, at the very least, an ambiguous set of data that it was trained on. That is, it is possible that these are things that have been trained on images for which there weren't permissions, and obviously that's a matter that will be settled by the courts. The thing is that people are really ready to point that gun, not knowing what model generated the images. Because there are, in fact, models that have used images that they own the rights for. It's very difficult to come up with an argument, at least the standard, this is unethical to use argument. I feel at the very least you should have some evidence that someone has, in fact, fallen afoul of whatever rule you feel that you're enforcing. But again, the difficulty in these, and sorry to bring it, I know some people get really touchy about the AI stuff, but I think the thing here is if there is a principle involved, right, if this really is about making sure that the artists are properly compensated for the work that they do, I think it's important to make sure that you have at least some evidence that this is in fact what is Like, what is at stake? Because of course the drawback is that if somebody does start condemning this as, you know, some evil artist, you know, art stealing project, you create no incentive for people, like the people who are trying to do the right thing, the people who are paying for the art, are already at a disadvantage from the people who are not doing that. And so to create a situation in which the response from the audience is indistinguishable between the two forms really suggests that the people who are not paying for this stuff are sort of the more likely to see the rewards. And I don't entirely feel comfortable with that. Like I'm not actually super encouraged with the way that a lot of this stuff has come about, but I also sort of understand that there are, you know, the big one for me has always been the argument from principle, rather than specifically trying to wade into the specific legalities. And that's because, one, it's not something I'm specifically trained in. But number two, I actually don't really think, I think the best that people can offer is an argument. And in the end, those arguments are already going to be heard by various authorities that are actually in a position to adjudicate some of that. And then again, if I would, you know, I have certain outcomes that I would prefer to see over other ones, but I think largely the question is, you know, what is the world that we live in, right? What is the set of rules for properly using this technology? And I would actually much prefer to see that as a settled matter, so that people can position themselves and decide whether or not the technology is worth it, rather than sort of doing what Twitch has largely done, which is to run out and essentially say that copyright infringement is okay as long as you have a sufficiently rabid fan base to make it, you know, there's like basically, if somebody doesn't want their game streamed, they either have to be large enough that they can enforce the rule, or they have to essentially weigh the balance of, do I enforce my property rights, knowing full well that there's going to be a group of people harassing me over, you know, my decision to, you know, have the creation that I've made use the way that I want. Like, I would prefer if it was easier. I'd actually prefer it if I had an option of being able to take whatever money was generated from a stream and give a portion of that to the creator. I actually think that would be the most fair system. It's also a system that requires Twitch to set up the infrastructure to do so, and there's no financial reason for them to do that. They're already taking half of the money that this channel already earns. So why would they give up some of that to the developer? And again, in this case, they get away with it because, you know, the very large channels are going to talk about how unfair and anti-gamer or anti-consumer this sort of stuff is, when of course the reality is we actually probably should want to see these things receive proper compensation. It's not like, you know, there's some games that are doing very well, but I think there's a whole class of games that would actually benefit from seeing something from the entertainment that they're giving to people. I realize that's another very controversial position to be on. But I do find it funny that there are people who will be very, very set against something like generative AI, but would also be strongly opposed to some kind of revenue sharing within streaming. So this is, again, why I wind up having some of these less popular positions, is that I do think it's helpful to think about what, specifically what principle is being upheld or not being upheld in a case, rather than trying to just sort of say, well, this works for me, so I'm okay with it. Because obviously everybody can say that, and they all kind of cancel each other out. All right, a recording of uncertain origin, inexplicably compelling poetry recorded by a speaker in a rasping, rumbling, impossibly deep voice in a language called Vak, which probably isn't spoken by more than a few dozen living scholars. The poem speaks of a four-winged war, a four-mouthed king, a four-rayed sun, a four-cornered stone. It speaks of a tide-washed hunger of the heart. It speaks lastly of its own conclusion, when it might be spoken in dreams before the deep door by a messenger of histories. The Geminiad Volume 1, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty, and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language few seen is much older. Its cover is tooled goatskin decorated with garnet. These pages outline the nature and the doctrines of an hour that weaves together the willing, an hour that is sought beneath the moon and at the water's edge, the sister and witch. The language is willful, naughty, poetic. It'll take some untangling. The first volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the sister and witch has been known to manifest as the witch and sister, and that this face is always hungry while the other face may heal. It implies connections between the sister and witch and the hours of the upper Mansus, especially the lunar hour called Menascate, but it is ambiguous on whether the sister and witch is a Mansus hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, of the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. The sea does not regret. Eason Fekri, one-time Secretary Salvant to the Curia of the Isle, responsible for the Curia's healing efforts, writes of his experiences in Brandkrug and hints at his travels elsewhere. The sea does not regret the tide, Fekri writes, for when the tide is passed, it leaves traces on the sand, which traces are the sea's memory. Fekri is a keen fisherman and speaks glowingly of the fish suppers of Brandkrug. He also admits that his enthusiasm for the bounty of the sea has altered him, that before he came to Brandkrug he consumed only those things found in the earth. I was the greater thereby, but all of us give up what we were to become what we are. The Red Book of Brittany, a volume of inklore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman conquest. The red flower lies heavy, but the roots of the watchman's tree are constant. By the way, sorry for the AI rant. I realize I was just talking about how it's beneficial to be a heel, but it's important to have a heel in the community. That's the main one. The red flower is described as the temptation of suffering, but its suffering can apparently be allayed when the copper fruit is inspelled with nectar aspect alongside herbs and infusions techniques. A variant of the same approach, with the inks of power techniques outlined here, can gentle Lethe into a great ink. So we need one more memory. On Matthias and the Amethyst Imago, Pursuit, an account of an occult romance, a certain mech claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Theban branch of the House of Lethe, that order of immortals who use the arts of water to conceal themselves. Matthias defied us to hunt the names of the moth in the wood and to populate his pinned collection. The Amethyst Imago had dallied with the witch and sister, but she'd returned to the wood to plead the moth's pardon. The moth, as a whim or penance, sent her out to lure the Long to a slough of nightmares. Matthias loved the Imago. Did he? Can Long love? Or is that organ of their soul desiccated beyond repair? The Imago loved Matthias. Did she? Or did she only enact a whim? He pursued her through the wood, but at last she turned aside from the nightmare slough, and they lay together in the bound where the bounds grow bright. So they learnt the Grail's pleasures, and this is the lore they won. As the sun his course, Joel of the Bridge, a retired soldier and sometimes tollkeeper, wrote this epic poem about Alexander's famously inexplicable decision at Issus to withdraw from the war with the Achaemenids, and his subsequent return to Macedonia. Alexander meets at Issus with Darius, king of kings, for 3 days and 3 nights. On the first day, the two men trade threats. On the second, promises. On the third, secrets. Darius tells Alexander something so shattering that he retires to his tent to consider matters of strength and matters of mastery. At dawn on the 4th day, Alexander announces, "The sun has his course upon which he returns, and so do I." He returns to Macedonia, executing 2 of his captains when they dispute his decision. He brings with him the names of a blind god and the rite of sacred betrayal. For, Joel opines, without betrayal, there would be an end to war. Okay, so I'm running out of space for the extra stuff, but I still need the herbs and infusions memories. The Invisible Opera, unfinished recording. A recording of a 1911 attempt to perform, at a performance of Wings Within Wings, the so-called Invisible Opera. Well, I appreciate that, Hisley, the Fox. It is nice to have somebody around to listen to this. The singers complete the Skewbald aria, Beneath Our Skin, and A Rose in Maya without incident, but the Invisible Opera is dedicated to Faresref the Magpie, who delights in unexpected interruptions. The recording ends with a clamor of horrified voices, a grating metallic screech, and a soft brass buzzing that fades into burring silence. Okay, so I'm going to level up herbs and infusions, and then I am going to take a tea break. I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can, but I know I'm going to be boiling the kettle for the first time, so that usually takes a bit longer than I normally want. At last, I'm something of an authority in this. Improve the skill to level 6. Maybe before I do that, let's queue up what I need for sharps. So I believe it was Desires and Dissolutions I was going to use for that. Okay, so sharps for Desires and Dissolutions, we need 5 Grail or Moon. So we're at 4. So Rites of the Roots would need 6. And we only have 1 so far. And then Sickle and Eclipse, when I get around to it, moves up Sandstorm. Oh, that's interesting. Yep, no, it works. Okay. So there is a small temptation to just use the old wound here. Wait a minute. Because I can get that easily enough with Edict Smart. Actually, you know what? Not even going to think about it. What do I have the most of? Whist. So yeah, when I get back, I'm going to be able to focus on spices and savors, and then we will work on sand stories. From there, basically Disciplines of the Hammer and is more of the same, right? So we'll probably be moving up. We'll be focusing on the 6 and the 7, so spices and savors will already be leveled up, but I think we'll probably take care of bells and braziers, Meniscate Reflections, and Sharps. Actually, you know what? Let's just write that down. And then Disciplines of the Scar. I think this is actually the point where we cross over and actually need to start leveling up some 7 stuff, so... that's going to require some specific attention. But overall, here's the main observation that I have. Out of what we started off with at the start of the day, we have, admittedly, it's 3 skills, right? Sharps, Rites of the Roots, and Sickle and Eclipse. But realistically, it's only the remaining 2, Rites of the Roots and Sickle and Eclipse, that we need to finish for the day. Those I think we can pretty reliably have finished before sundown. We might even be able to do something with Disciplines of the Hammer, but that's more of a nice to have. So if that's the case, I probably need 2 more full days to be able to get that stuff done. There may be some other advantages, or there may be some other angles on this that I can take, but that'll be my rough estimate in terms of the time that it'll take. And I think that's completely fine. Like, we still have some time in the season, but I do want to primarily focus on getting those skills up, and then maybe around autumn we'll focus on the remaining, we'll focus on the films. But I did threaten to go and get some tea, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. So thank you everybody for hanging out. I'm going to try and do as much of a show as I can. Hey, Vesper, good to see you. I must apologize. For those of you who don't know, Vesper Fortune, in addition to being a talented broadcaster in his own right, and very, very complimentary on my own broadcast, actually very kindly made a tea screen for me. And I feel rather bad that I've still been using my text screen here. The only reason for this is because between being sick and between starting stream at the time that I normally finish it, I have not yet actually saved the image in my, like, stream stuff folder. And there's a side of me that kind of wants to do this, but there's also a side of me that just wants to get the tea out of the way. So, I will also mention that Vesper has now bought 2 games for the stream here. So you are going to have to all accept that Vesper is somebody who's actually done a lot to help bring this channel to you. And I have messed up in the sense that I haven't got his lovely gift up and ready to show off on the time that he's visiting. I did, however, want to take the time to shut that out. And I imagine, I don't know if you've mentioned doing this or not, Vesper, but if you do commissions, feel free to shout yourself out for that, because I don't know. Again, I haven't shown your lovely art. Definitely not intentional. But if you do want to show off some of your stuff, or if you do want to try and drum up some business, you may. You just do gifts. Okay, never mind. You can't have him. I've got his art. Anyways, Vesper, if I don't have this up on Wednesday, you are completely allowed to slap me upside the head. I want to try and make sure that this thing's ready to go. Anyways, I gotta get my tea. I will see you all in a minute or two. Thank you all for your patience. And thank you again for stopping by, Vesper, and being a good sport about the fact that I didn't have your image ready for your visit to the channel. Okay. We have some work to do. Oh no, sorry. Spending all this time and I'm not, I haven't queued up my new books. So, sharps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we're ready to go. So it was rights of the roots, 2 spices and savors. And unexpectedly that was, actually this is going to be a hard one. So we need forge and nectar for this one. Let's go top to bottom again. Okay, so patterns will come through again, so I think we're starting from the beginning. I guess in a pinch I can go for touch as well, but that does mean that the sort of the sequence gets broken a little bit. Okay, none of these are going to help me. Forge and nectar. So regrets will help. I think we're on to shape and smoke. What am I doing? Okay, more forge where I can. So foresight's the obvious one. Trying to remember where we left it off. I think we did amalgam. Let's do manner in which the alchemist was spared, because I suspect I had to skip over that for the VAC at some point. So let me just double check where we're at. So we've, oh darn it, I already did the regret. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3. Let's go for the health. I think it's just the impulse at this point. So, Damascene traditions. Okay, so that's 4 of 6. We can throw in the earth sign for 5. Earthquake name's a little harder to... Oh, thank you. Thank you, Vesper. I'm obviously not on the ball. This is why I need a professionally done sign, so that it's easier for me not to notice. Oh, sorry, it's easier for me to notice, rather. Harder for me to forget. Alright. I mean, the other alternative is the Hive's Lament. So supposing I do that, we would take the drums and dances, which is already pretty high. I think we just throw a health at it. Not quite so easy. I do actually need to bring some more net. Well, okay, not so fast. There we go. So let me just make sure I have the proper accounting here. So you've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and then I have to subtract one of them. Okay, so we have what we need for Rites of the Roots. The last one would be Sand Stories. So that's Moon and Rose. Nothing that I can work with here. But what I can do, I can take strings and songs. We can add a fet to that. Oh, actually, it doesn't have to be a fet. It can be a fos too. It can be anything really, but so that's one of the 5 that I need. Definitely another one of these. We'll use the shaft in this case. So that's for the confounding parable. Oh, but we've already used the vac, so I don't have that option. But if this is looking for Rose and Moon, I can do the interview with Lacombe. The Velletri interviews. So that's 1. For 2, I'm trying to think if there's another audio that I can use for Rose and Moon. I think that's it. But if I'm going for Moon, we can go... Oh, actually, Temptations of Architecture will do the trick. We've already used up the vac, so... So that's 2. 3. I think I'm gonna have to start going for 4, and then the contradiction should be 5. And actually that fits quite neatly. Oop, that's not Collar's desk. Fits quite neatly with the number of desks that I have. Okay, so I'm kind of hoping I haven't... I'm surprised about one of the pianos not having a story about it eating people. One could write a really nice mythos. Well, I mean, there is the... Are you familiar with the 6th History license, Vesper? I figure as a writer that might actually be something that intrigues you. Actually, maybe just in general, because I was talking a little bit about copyright stuff before. For those of you not familiar with this, Weather Factory has a pretty generous licensing system. So below a certain threshold of revenue, and as long as you use appropriate labels in that, you actually are able to create your own secret history, or basically your own commercial products in the secret history setting. Now, the main thing about this is it's intended to permit sort of these small-scale fan works to give people a mechanism through which they can be financially rewarded, or at the very least compensated for what they're doing, but not necessarily be something that sort of like undermines the, you know, the Weather Factory IP. Like, obviously they've spent quite a few years and a considerable amount of their talent to build this setting and this, you know, this IP. So obviously they don't want to give the whole thing away. But the idea here would be, if you have a fan project of some kind, you would you would be able to do something like the Sixth History, and you would be able to charge for it. If it gets past a certain threshold, then basically you need to go into a proper agreement with Weather Factory. They've been pretty clear that they expect to maybe, I think at most do one of those a year. I actually don't know anything other than the Locksmith's Dream that has ever actually hit that level. But I think it's really cool that they've done that, because if you think of it, like, one of the reasons why I think this is a nice way of handling it is that it hits the nice balance of making sure that the creators are protected. And I totally get that, companies are not always the most sympathetic for people to look at, but Weather Factory is two people, right? But the other thing that's neat about it is when you think of some of the properties that people get really excited about, they're very often, ones which have sort of a number of different products, a number of different experiences across various forms of media. So one thing I'm particularly thinking of would be BattleTech, which is not just a tabletop miniature game, it's a role-playing game. There's sort of a campaign mode if you want to do something larger scale. Many successful video games. A very, very long-standing series of novels. It was a TV series. It was a set of virtual reality centers, which are still going on, I found out. They're actually still getting regular updates to them, no less. The only thing I don't think it's had yet is a feature film, and even then, it has actually been optioned for a feature film. And I think this is a big one. If you've ever played the most recent BattleTech game, I'm specifically talking BattleTech by Harebrained Schemes, not MechWarrior 5 and MechWarrior 5 Clans, which are perfectly fine. Like, that's not a knock on them as a game, but I wanted to specifically highlight here the BattleTech name and Harebrained Schemes at the time. Well, I mean, it was founded by Jordan Weisman, but Jordan Weisman was still at the company while they were making it. It very much is sort of BattleTech being made by the people who originated it. And I think what's notable about that game was they did actually take the time to tell a pretty decent story in the setting. And I think that's always been an important part of BattleTech, which is that you have reasons for people going in the mechs. Like, obviously the mechs on their own are very attractive and, that's a reason to play the game on its own. But I think that game punched above its weight specifically because it did in fact tap into the fact that it is a setting in which these quite high-stakes stories are told. And I think there's some value in... I definitely think that there's some value in working with that. By the way, it did occur to me that I could have gotten some easy edge by chucking some sand. But I can do that now. So the other property that I would think that that's true for is the Warhammer 40K universe, right? There's tons of novels, there's a television show in development, and it's been quite successfully adapted to the video game setting, right? With the Dawn of War and Space Marine series at a minimum. Obviously, there are other games as well. Now, those are properties with considerable financial resources behind them, or at least the potential for it. So FASA is owned by Microsoft, and Warhammer 40K is owned by Games Workshop. That's a publicly traded company, effectively backed by that and a couple of other IPs that they either have or license. But again, these are very large companies with the resources to be able to send it out over all of these different formats. Weather Factory is never going to be able to realize all of the potential in this setting. And so what's neat about the Sixth History is that it's a way of distinguishing like what the official products are and what the knock-on products are, but they are allowing people to invest themselves in that setting and to be able to expand it in a way that, is clearly very enjoyable to people, right? It's something that I think a lot of people who enjoy, D&D, Warhammer, BattleTech, there's a number of these different things. It's a nice balance of making sure that people are able to get the most out of well, at both ends, that the owners of it are still able to make a living doing it, but that the fans don't necessarily feel like they need to, bolster somebody else's property, somebody else's, this thing of value, that they are actually able to realize something for themselves through doing that work. Hisley, happy to catch the scream, but it's time for you to go freeze to death in -12. Have as good of a one as you can. I appreciate you hanging out and being such an enjoyable chatter. And I'm sure I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, let's keep moving on. But yeah, for those of you not familiar with the 6, I definitely recommend checking out the Weather Factory site for that, because obviously if you are going to be getting to that point where you do want to take advantage of those terms, it's really important to know what those terms are. But it is something I actually would encourage people to check out and engage with too. All right. Let's level up Desires and Dissolutions. I'm going to need to get a replacement Earth sign at some point, but I'm not quite worried about that yet. When something is given to the sea, it rarely returns, although of course I did. Dead men don't tell no bloody tales. Well, who'd listen? Oh, that gossip's actually going to be helpful for the sad stories. This might actually push me ahead for starting to use the Disciplines of the Hammer, but I'm not banking on it. Move gingerly while the pain lasts. Alright, this skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Where are we at? So, not a lot of value in waiting... not a lot of value in trying to do something with a consider verb while we wait 3.1 seconds. We'll just let the books catch up to where we're at. And we'll see what we have to work with. Okay. I feel like I may have overwritten a couple of things. Advice on containment. Thirza Blake discusses ways to keep wood things outside. Advice on containment. Thirza Blake discusses ways to keep wood things out of trouble and Mantis things in it. Thirza is irritatingly light on specifics, insisting above all that the duties of an adept are the duties of a host, and that a conjured spirit should be kept in as luxurious a vessel as possible. Thirza notes the similarities between the lantern-long habit of scrying, returning to the physical world despite their absence of a body, by entering a mirror or light, and Pomander's techniques for confining Mantis Long to mirrors. She wonders whether Pomander himself might be lured to visit Hush House if provided with a sufficiently alluring scrying. So remember, this is for spices and savors. Let it rise in head and heart at half sorrowful music of half pleasant longing. The Scar in the Sky. Nin wrote this and came to regret it. Each page of this book contains one word only, but as each page is turned, a knowledge creeps in. The final page is crowded. Each reader of the book records the same word. Now it is my turn. The manner in which the alchemist was spared. In 1782, Émile Verdier used this text as the basis for a presentation to the Academy of Sciences in Paris. He was executed in secret the following morning without trial. In the days of the Carapace Cross, when humanity lived in the dark and ate on its knees, humans could enter the Mantis like vermin. One learnt the arts of flint, the arts of shaping and remaking. Through the black, the yellow, the red, the unwise mortal ascended to the shadow of the egg unhatching, and remained in his service. He may be there to this day. The Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowen. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair. Even now in Treowen, a silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowen, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. The Queen's Turn, a 16th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the queen unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the Hours of the Triple Knot, as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the Low Red Sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The Hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters, but wily Lagia has decided, in the secret hollow of her heart, that she will adopt any who ask if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as hill and hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn, but now that she is a name of the Red Grail, they might also be safely used before an altar of the Triple Knot. The Damascene traditions of the House of Leith. The House of Leith was an order of immortals who sought obscurity, rejecting their past and future. If the author of this short text is to be believed, the initiates of the Damascene branch were much more radical than their fellows elsewhere. The house generally forbade any potentially procreative activities for fear of the terrible consequences of too long bearing a child. The Damascene order took this much further. At one point, male initiates were required to undergo castration, and female initiates to strangle any children they had previously born. These measures were so horrific that the order was shaken by repeated schisms, and eventually absorbed into the local Sisterhood of the Knot as a society of healers and exorcists. But still, you gotta break a few omelets to make an egg. Against the Sisterhood of the Knot and the foulness of their depraved customs, Hieronymus Pseudo-Hypnotimachus wrote this furious screed about the sinister influence of the Sisterhood of the Knot on his own Church of the Unconquered Sun. Hieronymus claims that the powers served by the Sisterhood of the Knot made an arrangement. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grail destroyed him as restitution for the destruction of the Axe's loved ones. Hieronymus's writing becomes incoherent with rage at this point. Hieronymus recovers his composure, eventually, to describe how the Thunderskin entered the Mansus through the Peacock Door. This, Hieronymus insists, is abomination upon abomination, but then that most abominable of doors has always been an abomination. Alright, folks. Get the best viewers on Twitch that you can. Nope. The offer of a lifetime is done. You already know you're all the best viewers. Alright, intuition. Honey, the Comprehensive Guide. Harvey Haddington. Let's try that again. Harvey Haddington, pilot, polymath, confectioner, writes with great enthusiasm about the marvelous work of the bee. Haddington insists that all the primary aspects, nectar, scale, heart, lantern, moth, grail, are possessed by bees and expressed in honey. Clearly, he points out there are only 6 primary aspects, as a honeycomb has only 6 angles. Yugal ink is prepared with these techniques, but so is Skinshuck mead, and only Skinshuck requires honey, just as any beverage or foodstuff can be improved with the addition of honey, so any garden is improved with the presence of bees, even those bloody blomberendi. This is actually one thing I'm looking forward to. So we do have a beehive at work, so I am eager for spring, summer, so that the bees can come back. The Velletri interviews, interrogation of a man named Lacombe, a former Nocturnal Branch inspector, now identified as terminally robogoid. Lacombe is not especially lucid, and the state called robogoia evidently includes a malady of the lungs which causes coughing fits. He weakens audibly over the course of the interrogation. He is questioned about the disposition of various unsanctioned items recovered from a Nocturnal Branch raid on a castle at Ortuccio, in the region of the Fucine Marshes. He is, however, defiant as well as incoherent. Lacombe insists that the items have been put to good use. He derides Nocturnal Branch as the lackeys of Calyptra, Alarmingly, during the last few minutes of the interrogation, he begins to insist that his interrogator should burn the library. He waxes enthusiastic about the fire he wants to see, leading to a final coughing fit, after which the interview abruptly ends. Okay, so I have a little bit of work ahead of me here. For our spices and savors, we needed 6. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're good to go there. And I will rearrange this appropriately. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. Now, the Sickle and Eclipse, let me just double check that is for the Sand Stories. Yep. So, 1, 2, 3. So I only need 2 more of these. So the Wistful Air and the Secret Threshold make the most sense, because then I can take Disciplines of the Hammer for sharps. Yeah, so it's going to be a little tricky because I need to work out both the edge and the moon, but I think I can get that done. I also probably should double check that I have what I need. So Fet and... Shucks. Nope, Fet and Trist will cover me for those 2. I think that'll take me to the end of the day. So, for one last round, we'll take the core here. Now, the first thing I want to do is restore my Earth Sign. So I can't use Salt and I can't use Contradiction, but other than that, our goal now is going to be to get enough for Sharps. I'm trying to remember, I think we're on Gospel of Zacchaeus. So we're 2 of 6, 3 of 6. Which of these was I gonna do? All right, let me count over. So starting with 2, 3, 4. Edge and Moon. Trying to remember which of these I did. I think we might be on to Skin of Silver. But I believe that should cover us. So again, we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that should be for Sharps. I mean, it does invite the question whether I want to take a crack at Bells and Braziers or Meniscate Reflections, but I don't think, excuse me, I can pull that off. So I'm just going to let these hang around. Maybe we'll use the Foss to earn a bit of money. And a new book, The Hunting Journals of Brian de Wolf. Brian de Wolf, son of the 3rd Baron Brankrug, gives advice on hunting in the Bounds. So I might as well add this to the shelf here. I do at some point want to do a proper reshelving, but that's clearly not a priority right now. Okay, not going to say no to the Foresight, although we may not do a whole lot with it either. I also should have realized that I had the loss here, which I could have used towards Disciplines of the Hammer. What I may do, or not Disciplines of the Hammer, towards Sharps. What I might do is just take stock of the memories I already have, and then see if we want to take a crack at an existing memory. Probably not, but we'll see. The skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. So we keep going. Sand Stories to level 6. A buzzing in the skull. I think we put that beside the Ascended Harmony. But you can kind of see, so I don't know how much Mr. Kill really gave us for today, but you can actually see that that worked out quite well for us. Not only did we knock down everything from the salon, but we're actually already starting to whittle down the 6 lessons that I got over the course of the day. Now, in fairness, I probably could have saved the Wound Wounds for another day, just simply because I don't, I didn't really use anything out of the regret that came from that. If anything, I've actually got a surplus of memories. But I don't know. I think that overall this was a good day for us, and we are well ahead of where we wanted to be. So, Derasho Quercum. In English, the title translates roughly as The Account of the Oaks, but this is Nathaniel Darcy Evers' fascinating, if haphazard, survey of the occult properties of every tree he can find, not just oaks. In Persia, Taxus Baccata, the yew, is called Sorkdar, which is the red tree. There they had long understood the Grail root. In later times, the great king of Pontus had beehives set in the branches of the oldest of the female trees. The berries of the Pontine yew open the door to death, but the honey of their flowers opens a different door entirely. This was not the great king's Mithridate, but one who has suckled at the great yew fears poison no longer. Perhaps they should. Nathaniel is here distracted, however, by the toxic properties of certain inks. He does mention more usefully that the minor ink of power Yugol can be brewed through the rites of the roots with the assistance of the aspect nectar. The Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, and 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the hours, and Knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. The Other Line, one of Samuel Savage's more thoughtful works, an allegorical play about the city Clarity, a city that is also a book, and the sentences which inhabit it. The Lord's Proverbial and the Lord's Disquisitional war in the streets of Clarity, while the punctuants get drunk on ink and supply the jokes, though by Savage's usual standards there aren't very many jokes. The final act sees the Lord's Proverbial unsealing the city Clarity's gate to expel the population into the unknown. The formula that they use for the unsealing is a real one. It can be used with knock and preliminal meter to create a gate sign of power. Skin of Silver, the epic of the final battle of the Lionsmith with the remnant giant Antaios. As always, the Lionsmith drew his strength from metal and Antaios from stone, but the Lionsmith began to suspect also that this time Antaios was drawing power from the moon. The Lionsmith beseeches the 3 for their assistance, and the Meniscate favors him with a skin of silver, like water, like mercury, so he too can drink from the moon. For, she whispers, he too will one day be drawn into a perfect balance. Now, one thing I always thought was sort of interesting about this one, right? So when I think of the 3, I've got Malachite, Assite, callicite, or in this case, malachite, horndax, and red grail. So when he besieges the 3, it is ultimately the Menascate, which is one of the solar hours. Although I suppose in that case it would be a name of the sun and splendor at that. I should work out the timeline of all of that. Anyways, I do think it's kind of interesting that it refers to the 3, but it's actually a little difficult to know exactly what it's referring to, because the response is not necessarily someone you would have expected when seeing a reference to the 3. It's also possible that maybe, I guess if this predates, this could be something, well no, because Antaios I think is a remnant, but I was going to say maybe the Watchman isn't into the picture yet. Something to think about. The Republic of Teeth, an eccentric political tract by Valentine de Wolf. Valentine suggests that rulers should be elected to govern by serpents, not their subjects, for the serpent, being cold-blooded in its nature, is incorruptible. Valentine's initial proposal is that a college of electors should subject themselves to the bites of venomous serpents, which he grades and details, preferring the least dangerous, and should allow the resulting deliria to guide them in their choice of people's representatives. He becomes concerned, however, by the practicalities of ensuring equal quantities of venom in each case, and gets halfway into a proposal for using birds instead in the selection process before giving up mid-sentence. And apparently I read but did not keep that. Okay. So I just want a minute here to make sure I'm not doing anything silly. So I think the idea here was to take Disciplines of the Hammer to level up sharps. So I can use the loss for that. Yeah, but the rest of those are open. So we've got 1, 2... Let's just spread it all out. Okay, so I've got 7 of the required elements. We have to use the Trist to level this up. So Menascate Reflections is... Well, okay, so we've got Bells and Braziaries, which would be Forge and Sky. I have Menascate Reflections, which would be Edge and Forge. So Forge applies to all of them, so we've already got the Foresight. I could give up the Confounding Parable, and that would work for Bells and Braziaries. Or I could give up any one of these, and that would apply directly to Menascate Reflections. So it's about even. The really frustrating thing about this is, so if I just do the math on it, right, I just need 6 of one of these. Let's just say I pull aside Confounding Parable for the sake of the argument. So, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we level up sharps. But then how do I get Bells and Braziaries up? So we've got 2 of the 6 required. However, we need every element of the soul here plus something to level up. So I could use the Shaft, for instance, for either Bells and Braziaries or Menascate Reflections, but I would need to use the Wisdom, the Core, so that gets me 4 of the 6 that I require. Now, I won't rule out the possibility. I guess I need to make a decision as far as Disciplines of the Hammer goes, and it really does come down to... yeah. Let's say... we'll take a flyer on... We'll take a flyer on Bells and Brageries. So I'll orient myself towards Grail-like things. Or not Grail-like, Sky-like things. So I'm not expecting this to work, but we'll still give it a shot. Oh, right. Okay, so I needed the tryst for that. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. So all told, barring something really crazy happening with Mr. Kill, we got one of the 6 surplus skills that we wanted taken care of. Not a bad haul. I'm sure with a little more precision I could have gotten even further with that. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. I'm going to take... We've already made money today, so what I'm going to do here, because it's Bells and Brageries that we're trying to put up, I'm going to bring back the metal. It is summer. I'm sitting outside... Sorry, I'm sitting on the bench outside the Sweet Bones, eating crumbly cheese and nettle wrappings and good black rye bread, soaking up the sun. So we'll get another music memory. In this case, we'll do The Wind's Ruin. So now we need fewer sky memories or forge memories from Mr. Kill. Hey, a storm! This is looking up. Actually, I think we've got it. Because if it's 6 for Bells and Brageries, we've got 3 right now. We're getting 3. Yeah, okay, that was that paid off. So we actually got to knock down 2. And the funny thing is, if I'd thought about it, I think I actually might have said I should have tried to go for the Menascate reflections for the simple reason that I could have generated a another edge from the loss. Right, the skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. Alright, well, the foresight we already had, but like I said, I'm happy with how it turned out with Mr. Kill. Night has fallen, dawn will come soon. I may want to pick a memory to take overnight, but let's make sure everything works the way it's supposed to first. Okay, the Perugian... Oop. The Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Olapoli left Strathcoyn's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyn. For 4 years since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Olapoli served as Strathcoyn's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, "I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We've agreed to part almost amicably." Olapoli left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of his journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are widely varying quality. Sorry. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of Old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. Unhatched hymns, hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Menascate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The Hymn of the Phases celebrates the Menascate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The Hymn of the Reflections, more puzzlingly, celebrates the Menascate as sister of Janus, mother of Shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. Okay, 3 seconds, and then we're good to go. Better now. Oh, looks like I'm actually 1 short. What a shame. The Wind's Ruin, the 2nd volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. Abbot Thomas speaks of his time as a raider when his name was not Thomas but Toke, scything the sea, striving for plunder. Abbot Thomas clearly regrets his storm years, and much of the book is taken up with his thoughts on penitence, but there are hints that he also misses those years, and the companionship of his sword brother, ship brother, Trygeave. So, I do have an outside option if I need it. Let's see what Mr. Kill gives us first. Okay, gossip. So, if we go for bells and braziers, so let's just take the ones that we already need. So Foresight, Confounding Parable, Storm, Cheerful Ditty, Savage. Oh, what am I saying? Okay, don't need to give up anything. Trust the plan. When I thought I understood, I'd only begun. Okay, so I'm gonna spend a little time just getting my notes back in order. So I was sort of doubling up a couple of entries just to save some space. But I'm free now to let it blow out. Okay, so in this case we just need Menascate Reflections. Now, Disciplines of the Scar is another question. So as usual, the best option here is just see what's available, right? So first of all, there's no Lantern at level 5, or practically at level 6. So remembering that Menascate Reflections will become level 7. So realistically here, we're looking to level up level 7 skills at either with Lantern or Edge. I'm kind of inclined to level up Auroral like I'm sort of skipping the queue on a few of these, but I think what I'm gonna do, Auroral Contemplation's up here. So getting ahead of myself. Sickle and Eclipse, probably. Excuse me. And we'll put Purifications and Exaltations up as well. It would be kind of appropriate to do Watchman's Paradoxes, but I think I'm happy with this. I guess the only thing is that there's technically a little bit of Lantern that gets doubled up, but that's made up for the fact that there's a bunch of Sky too. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. So let's do this in the order of Purifications and Exaltations. So that will equip me for Sickle and Eclipse. And then Auroral Contemplations last. Obviously, I can change this over the course of the day, but I think that works. Now another thing that I can do, knowing that I'm going to need some lantern, I can actually take the Bittersweet Certainty, which I know that Mr. Kill isn't going to be able to generate on his own, and we can save that overnight, which saves me a memory. And here's what I think I'm going to do. I know I like to normally go for 3 hours, but it is a bit past midnight, and I do have a bit of an early morning tomorrow. So what I will do, I'll set the timing for the end of stream. I'll set that around a goal. So what would be nice to do is wrap up the work from the Carmine Petal. The skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. So let's say that I'll get the edge and the forge that I need for Meniscate Reflections. That'll be the goal for now. And then once we do that, we'll wrap up the stream for today. And I'll finish off the main task for I'll finish off like the rest of it for on Wednesday's stream. Okay, now I don't think there's going to be too much weather-wise that affects our path, so I think we're just going to plow ahead and start committing these. So, first goal is anything forge and edge. Remembering that in this case, this is 6. Okay, so patterns are an example of that. We're on to the Raptures of Forculus. We're on to Keonid Abydos. Yep. Foresight. I guess onto the big blue business. So that's 3. 4. 5. I think probably Contradiction's the last one that I need. 6. Okay, so that's the Meniscate Reflections batch. I could also bring in Touch. Well, it does save me the Contradiction. Yeah, let's do that, actually. Let's find a new chair to... Okay, so Purifications and Exaltations, that is Lantern and Sky. So I do want to be a little more careful on this one because there are some ways that I can angle this to my favor. So first of all, we'll use the music for music, or the phonographs for music. So on back to opening the sky. And then Lake Fusino recordings. So that's technically 3, but let's just say 2 for now. Three. 4. 5 already from the rest. Six. So I guess we go for the storm. So that's the 7. And then that puts me to Sickle and Eclipse. So I should be using salt for that. I'm not gonna lie, that is a lot more progress than I was thinking we would be making. Okay, yeah, so I think we're laughing as far as the skills are concerned. I think probably within the first minute we have 2 of the 4 we want done. It's probably not going to be completely in the bag. Oh, the clouds helps though. So that'll push us ahead on Sickle and Eclipse. Mr. Kill can always spare a few hours to help a friend. So because one of the things that was holding us back yesterday was Elements of the Soul, I'm going to be a little more careful on keeping the ones that I've used for other purposes recharged. There's the loss. I want to prioritize using loss where I can, but I don't have... there's not an infinite number of opportunities to use it as well. Alright, I've carried a memory like a flambeau, safe through the mazes of night. Okay, the staff armchair polished by the posteriors of dozens of loafing prison guards. For a great many years, this chair sat below a dartboard. The leather is pocked with marks of occasional misses, or just possibly assassination attempts. So in 30 seconds, we will have the memories that we need. And I did say I was going to wrap up when I had Menace Gate Reflections ready to go, but I do want to queue up the next batch of excuse me, memories as well. So we still have a bit of time. If I'd been a little more clever, I probably should have got a second memory, so a sight would have been helpful here, but it's a little late to... I have to basically do that immediately after. The Raptures of Forculus, the first volume of Abbot Geoffrey's hypothetical theological debates in the Socratic mode. If Janus were an hour, Forculus might be counted among his names, but that door remains closed, and so Forculus is not. Geoffrey discusses the signs that mark doors, which might permit or forbid access to certain thoughts and dreams, speculating carefully on which of the sanctioned hours might teach or govern each sign. Kion at Abydos, a play dealing with a 9-year sojourn of a snow goddess in the Thracian city of Abydos by Apollo Fireweaver, in English, published in 1892, purportedly from an older Greek text. The entity called Kion arrives in a blizzard and demands the city gates are barred. As Abydos falls under her spell, the dead return but do not speak. For 8 years, the city is a place of slow death, frosty ecstasy, and silent beauty, but in the 9th year, a conspiracy of shouts is mounted against the quiet that Kion demands. The conspirators open the city gates, and a scarred man comes to drag Kion out by the hair. Summer returns, but the conspirators die of remorse. Colors in the Liver, Ilse Bischof's most controversial film, blamed for outbreaks of cannibalistic killings in Tiflis and Leipzig. A gang of heretic priests agree to strike the fear of the change into the infuriatingly atheist citizenry. At night, they dress as four-winged angels and crawl down chimneys and through windows to savage members of their congregation. The priests are caught by unidentified figures wearing heavily mandibled masks, like grotesque caricatures of ants. They are force-fed larvae. A final caption indicates that at dawn the larvae will hatch. Not a fan of the Scarred Man, are you, Vesper? Opus Magnum Ceruleum. I love the description of this one. Ambrose Westcott used to render the title of this venerable and anonymous work mockingly as The Big Blue Business. A kinder translation would be The Great Work in Azure. The reasons for Westcott's enmity to this work are clear to any pyroglyphicist. It was written at least 2 centuries before he was born, but anticipates or undermines many of his preferred conclusions. The work in question is the creation of the blue gold allegedly necessary for the terrible rite which allows a forge long to become a name. The book mentions that pyroglyphics techniques can be used with forge to create iotic essence as a necessary component, but withholds the final step, insisting that the consequences are too dire, and that any interest should remain only a matter of theory. Opening the Sky, an unusual recording of Varro's Opening the Sky, composed for the coronation of the new King Henry IX. The record bears the suppression stamp Expunge. The first movement is soft, autumnal. The second, unsettling, febrile. The third is bright, soaring, rapturous. The fourth movement is glassy, slithering, a tintinnabulous icicle rattle. The fifth returns to the theme of the third, bright and rapturous once again, but this is a choral movement. It becomes apparent, though, that these are much, much too pure and high to be human voices. They recall birdsong. They recall the sweep of the windswept sky, blue turning black at the edge of the higher heaven, and they wrench the heart in a direction that the Bureau does not permit. Singlefoot songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the Grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. The Viennese Conundra. Van Driel describes odd events in Vienna, the disappearance of children, epidemics of parasite activity, animal mutilations, nightmares of worms, the activities of a charitable organization, the New Legions, that funds the burial of the poor. She proposes peculiar connections between these activities. When the individual K attends the meetings, black dogs are sacrificed and quartered. When the element M is in attendance, black mares are found with their throats slashed. I propose that these sacrifices are not necessary, but that our Legion friends may consider them fitting. Herewith, diagrams of the mutilations. Medusa's riddle, then, I choose to render as what is not seen. There is another riddle, one that I have heard rendered as what may be lost. I will delineate some historic attempts to answer it. These are, in themselves, in some sense, sacrifices. Let it rise in head and heart. Apollo and Marsyas, the libretto of a lost opera concerning the contest between Apollo and Marsyas and its tragic outcome. The librettist is identified only by their initials. In the original myth, Marsyas lost the musical contest and was flayed by Apollo, who later regretted it. In this version, Marsyas' skin has a further history. The skin of Marsyas gives oracles and is later smuggled to Phrygia, where the priestesses of Cybele use it for a drum. At the climax, the striking of the drum drives would-be violators of the priestess to suicidal madness. The opera ends with a wistful hymn from the youngest priestess on the beauty of mountain pines. The Voyages of Furnishon of Oriel, the impossible travels of a sea captain of the late Phoenician era. Suppressed throughout recorded history, those who read it were said to disappear. Furnishon clearly visited the Mansus, sailing the length of the Painted River. He also claims to have traversed a sea of finest sand, to have dared the blazing waves of the sun's surface, and to have descended to an underworld ocean lit by lamps of black nephrite. Furnishon's final voyage is to retirement on a peaceful island across the evening sea, where he identifies a spring whose waters will keep him safe. I will be forgotten, he declares, and this work my only trace. So if you can just give me a second here, I'm going to start keeping some notes on something, so... The Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes, the wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the songs the sisters sang to the witch, that the Thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendrazones of the Mansus keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. And De Bellis Murorum, an 18th century epic poem by the pseudonymous Solipstos. The poem elliptically describes a war between beasts, weather phenomenon, and arcane concepts. It's quite specific about their tactics. The two one joined and the horn distinguished, consequently blood. Alright, lots of goodies to play with, but the focus first is going to be... So, number one, it's Meniscate. 2, Purifications and Exaltations. 3, Auroral Contemplations. So, first thing we're going to do is get the Meniscate Reflections ready to go. And I believe out of all of these, this needs Forge. So let's first queue up the Forge that we need. So, Regret, Pattern, Foresight, and Touch. So that's 4. Loss is an obvious one because that's easy to get back, so that's 5. So I just need one more. Now it seems to me like Fear is probably the obvious answer here because that's something that Mr. Kill may generate on his own. So I think we've got enough to make our decision now. So Meniscate Reflections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I think probably, yeah, we have to, well, I could use Arab as well, but we'll go for metal on this one. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Okay, but so let's also queue up the, Purifications and Exaltations. So for that one, that's the only one that can use the sky. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Six, 7. I'm probably going to go later than that then. Okay. So, yeah, I did say I was going to finish as soon as Meniscate Reflections was ready, but I actually have more or less what I need for Purifications and Exaltation. Well, sorry, I have what I need for Purifications and Exaltations. We actually have a pretty good head start on Sickle and Eclipse as well. So, for Sickle and Eclipse, we need 6 between Or sorry, we need 7 between edge and moon. So that gives us 4. Don't have that much to work with, though. Well, that's not true. Okay, so that's 5. Six. Yeah, and the fear will be 7. I genuinely don't remember which one I was reading last. I guess we're on to Tantra of Worms. Hey, no problem, Jamie. Thank you very much for hanging out. I'm probably finishing up pretty soon myself. All you're really going to be missing is 30 seconds of me queuing this up. Alright, but I did lose track. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, just need one more for 8. No, hang on. We've got 7 of what we need. Okay, so that's Sickle and Eclipse taken care of. The last is Auroral Contemplations. So that's going to need Lantern and Edge. And I've sort of... excuse me. I've sort of used up all the Edge. Oh, good gracious. I actually also had the Clouds, which I was ignoring. But that's fine, because then we can apply the Contradiction to Disciplines of the Scar. So let's load up on Lantern stuff first. I'm going to consult my spreadsheet just to make sure that Book of True Blood I think it gives me... No, it gives fear. Okay. Was it Extinguished Heart then? Yes. Okay, so that's 2 of 7. Three of 7. 4 of 7. But that's it. Okay, not terrible. So the interesting problem here is I'm going to need another batch of... actually, I guess we're technically at 5 of 7 on this. I'm going to need another batch of edge stuff, but we're basically ready to level up everything that I need with Disciplines of the Scar. So this suggests to me I should be either reading the hunting journals of Brian DeWolf, or I should be reading the films, or both. Let's go for the hunting journals. I can master this mystery, enough scale to match mystery scale. I guess I can throw in another... Well, you know what? Actually, a Newman text wouldn't be a bad option here. So something with sky and... I mean, sky and scale would be the turquoise hand. Yeah. We can live a little. Honestly, it wouldn't hurt to throw a couple of... Yeah, you know what? I'm also gonna use the phonographs. So for that, core is definitely the one I want to use here. We'll do the usual suspects, so Lake Fusina recordings and the Invisible Opera. And that's kind of in preparation for the fact that we're going to have Furs and Feathers. I wouldn't normally have done this. Okay, so I did say I was going to wrap up reasonably soon, but I'm actually basically at the 3-hour mark here. So because I've got everything really wound up fitting quite nicely. So what I'm going to do here is I will wait the 30 seconds to get Meniscate Reflections in. And then from there... right, it has to be up here. But yeah, essentially we're kind of queued up for the next little bit. I think it wouldn't hurt to spend some money. Okay, so I'm going to bring a wisp back, and actually I should have tried to restore... Probably a Faust would make sense, given where we're at. This would have been better to do earlier, but I didn't think I would need the extra elements of the soul. Okay, don't think that gossip does anything for us right now, but I don't know what I'm doing with the remaining... I don't know. I don't actually yet know what I'm doing with the memories from the hunting journals. Again, I really just wanted to make sure that I locked in the leveling that I had planned. The skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. So for this one, this was going to be Purifications and Exaltations. That one, I believe, has to be Faust. Okay, it doesn't have to be Faust. I could also use a Whist. But we've got what we need. Okay. At last, I approach Mastery. Improve this skill to level 8. So yeah, it's a really good example of how the Salons really help your skill building. I am doing this because it's one of the easier ones available to me with Disciplines of the Scar. So, like, I want to use the smallest number of memories possible option is level 8 at this point. Okay. I think I am actually ready to call it here. Sorry, one last thing. I'm going to hunt for some sand. There we go. So for Wednesday, we are going to be putting... So the main effort's going to be to level up Sickle and Eclipse. And maybe spread these out a little bit better. So, oh, you know what? Sorry, I already had a loss here, so that's an unnecessary overwrite, but whatever. So we got 4 of that here. We need 3 more. So after that, we level up Auroral Contemplations. I believe I'm a couple memories short. Excuse me. There's probably going to be a bit of a gap while I get Furs and Feathers. Now, the one thing that I know we're not going to work with is Furs and Feathers, because that's already level 9. So it's a question of Scale and Sky, and it looks like our options here are going to be Sights and Sensations and Applebright Euphonies, assuming I have more than one. So those are level 6, so if it's 2, then a total of 12 memories. I don't see it being 3. Now the nice thing about this is that because there will be a sky element, I can basically rely on about 4 memories that Mr. Kill's not going to overwrite. And then from there, again, we still have quite a bit of time left in summer. So the plan here would be the Experiment Beyond Sight, the Open Head, and the Admonitory Automata project. Don't have a specific plan in terms of which one I'm going to read at which time, but those are the 3 remaining books for us to do. At which point, my main focus is going to shift from trying to level up skills, and instead I'm specifically going to be seeking out books that mention Noon and Ys, and essentially I'm going to try and take what I have in the library, possibly also an interrogation of the Tree of Wisdoms, but definitely take a look at the books in the library to see what both of them have to say about Ys and Noon. I'm definitely much more familiar with Noon than I am Ys. But, as I often say, that is all for the next stream. Excuse me. Sorry for the yawn. Let's see who's online. Not a usual finishing time for me, so... do we have anybody doing the Weather Factory stuff? No, so I am going to leave you in the capable hands of Kilgore Trout. But, again, thank you everybody for watching. I know a few of you have already gone to bed. I don't think there's any reason to watch the VOD at this point, but I always do want to express appreciation. Vesper, thank you for sticking around till the very end, and thank you for the kind words. I definitely appreciate them, particularly coming from you. And I'm hoping between now and the next time you come by, I'm going to have your lovely art set up for my tea message. I do apologize for not having that up on for you to see today, but I can assure you that it will be on there. Again, barring, so clearly the work situation's a bit, it's a little bit uncertain. I want to try and get out at a proper time, but I frequently don't. So the plan will be Wednesday 22nd, we will be back for more House of Light. That's true basically from now until the 3rd week of February. Just a heads up for the 3rd week of February, which is, I believe, the week of the 17th. It looks like for that week, I will have Family Day, which is a day off, but also the local game dev meetup. But again, the hope is to basically do everything up to that point. Anyways, I've got 3 seconds left, so thank you for watching. Have a good night. See you in the next one.